Steve, I think I'd like to start with your statement. You're welcome to stay there or come to the podium, whatever you want.
Great. Well,
okay, you got it. Okay.
Is this working? Yeah, great. Well, thank you, Pierre, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here at the opening panel of the Smart One Water, or Future of Water Summit, and to give you some thoughts on Smart One Water. So I've come at this, as Pierre mentioned, I currently lead the Resilient Services branch at CISA. I was previously at NIST for 19 years and worked on the community resilience program. So I kind of come at this with a background of thinking about how infrastructure responds to shocks, mostly due to natural hazards and deliberate attacks. But as I've been thinking about and working in this space over the last decade or so, I've got some perspectives that I've developed over time, and you've heard some of these themes through the course of this morning's sessions and in Pierre's opening remarks. But infrastructure really exists to serve our ability to function as a society. And so, when we start to think about the challenges, we really need to start at that level of understanding what is needed by society to operate. And water is really central to ensuring the health and safety of our population and our economic and national security. And we've heard that through much of the conversation this morning. When there's a disruption to water services, those can quickly cascade to disrupt other critical services and industries, and obviously can threaten public health. So without water, our modern society simply cannot function. So it's imperative for us to really think about how we ensure the safety, reliability, and resilience of our water systems and adapt to the future conditions to ensure water services to future generations. So I'm sure all of you read the news like I do. I have not opened the newspaper in the last week or more when there's not an article about water in some sense, whether it's drought in the West, extreme precipitation and flooding in Kentucky and parts of Virginia, or even sea level rise and coastal flooding. Water is central to our daily lives. So, when I think about water, it's really, or the future of water, what we're really thinking about is the future of society. And so the ability for us to continue to deliver water services, and when I say water services, I'm thinking about drinking water, wastewater services, stormwater management, is really about our ability to adapt to conditions over time. So with that as some context, I've put together some thoughts on what we need to do to enable Smart One Water. The first is the notion of moving to a regional or watershed approach. Our current approach is generally kind of locally focused and often siloed. We've heard a lot about that this morning. But we think about water, wastewater, and stormwater as sort of independent of each other. And that's proving to be inadequate in our current and even anticipated future conditions. So an integrated watershed approach will enable us to account for all water in the system, interactions among users within a regional context, and it will position the water resource managers and utility owner-operators to better plan and manage limited water resources. It may also give us a chance to identify opportunities to more efficiently provide water services across smaller communities. It may afford more opportunities to access funding resources that ensure that smaller systems are able to adapt to future needs and threats. Closely coupled with that is the need to take a holistic approach to planning and delivery of water services. So we've heard this morning about the water energy nexus. You can't produce energy without water, and you can't deliver water services without energy. And that's an example, but we also need to think about the dependencies of people, industry, and the economy on water services. And so that ability to think very holistically and look at all those dependency and interdependency relationships is critical to our future of water. This is going to come up in panel 3 tomorrow, which I'll be chairing, but you'll be hearing about how we can use predictive modeling to plan for future conditions. And so as water quantities change, we'll need to be able to predict and plan based on those predictions. And also, not only water availability, but demand based on population changes and other effects. Social equity is going to be a key tenet of the Smart One Water approach. I noticed Joe Manis had a slide this morning that very nicely showed the dependency of various groups on water and how they support the various aspects of the economy. And so making sure that we're delivering water services to everyone in an equitable manner will be essential for the future. Technology is going to be very important, but we need to be thinking about what data is critical to planning and operating systems, and how we deploy sensing and other technologies to implement those advances, and use that to understand our supply and usage, where we have issues in terms of water loss, and improve the operation of our systems. And then finally, implementing Smart One Water is going to depend on partnership. And that partnership is going to include federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial governments, the research community, engineers, and other private sector operators. That collective knowledge and expertise will have to be managed or marshaled under the Smart One Water umbrella. I love that slide this morning that showed that we had over 4,000 years of experience in this room. And I think that's going to be a critical factor going forward. We've heard a little bit about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and also the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program from FEMA. We're seeing a lot of federal funding that is going into not only infrastructure, but mitigation of hazards. And that is an opportunity for us. If we think creatively, we can take advantage of those resources and really make significant changes. One of the programs that my office runs, the Regional Resiliency Assessment Program, is a model for bringing all stakeholders together in a region and being able to look at the interdependency effects of infrastructure, who depends on infrastructure, and the consequences of failure. So models such as that, and also the infrastructure resilience planning framework that we've developed, and similar tools give us a way of bringing together all of the stakeholders who are dependent on the services that water provides. And then finally, making investments that are efficient, sustainable, and yield systems that are resilient to future conditions. And again, ensuring that all voices are heard, and that we're making the best available use of research and knowledge will be essential. So I'm looking forward to the rest of the discussion, not only in this panel, but over the next day and a half. We have significant challenges ahead of us, but I think as you're going to hear through the panel sessions, we have a lot of knowledge that already exists, and we just need a logical and systematic approach to make Smart One Water a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Eric.
Good afternoon, everyone. Igal Hashkhalil. I'm the General Manager of Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. Water provider. We provide water for almost 20 million people. One of every 17 Americans get water from us. But we're facing some, we call it the new abnormal with climate change, and we've been talking about it for a long time. I joined Metropolitan about a year plus ago, and I couldn't ask for a better opportunity to transform our future, to transform the future of water as we're dealing with the worst drought we've seen in our lifetime or history, probably. We're seeing conditions of strained conditions where water levels are at the lowest level. You've seen Lake Mead, Lake Powell, you've seen Lake Oroville. We get water from two sources, mainly Northern California, the San Joaquin, the Sacramento Delta, and then from Lake Mead and the Colorado River. That's what got us to the greatness of Southern California. And California has been able to bring water. That was 100 years ago, and Met is close to 100 years in age. What I talk about is the future of the next 100 years, is how we transform this water and how we manage water in a different way. What I say is the playbook that got us to where we are today is not going to carry us to the future. And what we need is new chapters in the playbook, or maybe throw the playbook completely and bring a new playbook. That playbook is probably called the One Water Playbook. And this integration approach, and I'm lucky that I was able to get to this position after serving on stormwater programs and wastewater programs and leading the efforts in LA for building a One Water initiative and an integrated plan. I have some of the folks here that worked with me on this. And really what we did is change the thinking. And what we did is actually broke silos down. And what we wanted to do is connect dots, drops, and hearts. And what we wanted to do is make sure that the source of the wastewater is close to the supply, is close to demand. If you separate and make them too far away, then you lose the ability to manage and the cost becomes expensive. And then we wanted to bring in multi-benefits. And stormwater at the time, we brought stormwater as a huge solution. And bring in multi-benefits, green infrastructure, wetlands, parks, and all these things that we've transformed as stormwater capture, infiltration, reuse. And that, I think, transformed the relationship with the public, because now most of the things that we do is underground. And as we're building this green infrastructure, wetlands, parks, and the things that we've done, it made water visible, and people could see it, and they saw the benefit it did to their communities. And that's why we were able to work in LA and be able to pass Measure W, which is a stormwater measure for funding investments in the county of Los Angeles. And a lot of it came out of this stakeholder-driven, integrated approach in the IRP and One Water LA plan. Now, forward to what I am today. I come in and dealing with a strained condition, no water is available. We are calling for health and safety allocations of water. I had to declare an emergency in November last year, where I had to ask people to conserve and stop watering the lawn. It made the news everywhere. And it's important to get the word out. And we actually declared a conservation emergency. As of June 1st, there's some areas in our region that only had one source of water, and they couldn't have water that would last them for the end of the year. So we asked them to conserve. That created a lot of tension. But to me, I look at it as an opportunity. I'm the optimist. And for me, that's the way now to bring in and develop the future. So now we're talking about this One Water plan that I'm leading in metropolitan service area. And that, it's not just local. I serve 6 counties, and I'm bringing everybody together to look at how we manage that. But also goes all the way up to Northern California, goes all the way to the 7 states along the Colorado River Basin and the country of Mexico. Now we're talking about how we all can work together to manage water, because we can't conserve our way out of it. We've been doing great in conservation. The water we're using today in Southern California is the same water we were using 40 years ago. And we continue to conserve. We're doing the investments of removing turf and putting something else in place, native and all that. But now the new thing is recycled water. So now I'm gonna be the provider, not the importer of water. So that's a shift. And now I'm building the largest recycled water plant to recharge our system, 150 million gallons a day. And we just got the authority to do progressive design build soon here by September. And that's gonna help us recharge, deliver water, but then get to the next level and figure out how we can move water around the system and use storage. We built storage in our system back in 2000. We have the largest reservoir in eastern part of Riverside, where it holds about 800,000 acre-feet of water, which is equivalent to Lake Havasu. And that was advanced thinking. So I want to build the same network of conservation, recycled water, but also groundwater. Groundwater for us, we are meeting a challenge. We talk about PFAS and other things, where we need to protect that water, recharge that water, and actually clean it up and reuse it. And that's a huge issue with the economic equity, because people that have groundwater basins in our area are mainly people that disadvantaged communities, and they have the least ability to protect that water. So our responsibility as a whole is to be able to clean the water, build the system, and that has been done in my city, in Fullerton, in Orange County, where they had a PFAS issue because of the years of recharge, and And now with Orange County Water District partnership, we're able to put in a treatment system on these wells to bring them back to service, because for me, that's critical to them being off my imported water system. And I need to invest in them. And that relationship, that partnership is happening across the board. But I believe One Water, the way people ask me what do you see in One Water, it's the 3 I's I use all the time. It's integration, innovation, and inclusion. Is you need to bring people together. And a lot of people don't know that the recycled water project that we're building is, we have a partnership with Southern Nevada Water Authority. We have a partnership with the Central Arizona Project, because the water we save and what we do in Southern California has a benefit across the whole basin. We're working together now on multiple projects. I'm visiting the tribes. I'm working with our partners there. Our environmental partners, I'm reaching out and building listening sessions to ensure that relationship is happening. And I'm glad that over the weekend, actually Friday, I was working with our senators, Feinstein and Padilla, on the language in this Inflation Reduction Act, that we were able to put that $4 billion, started as $5 billion, went down to $4 billion for the relief in conservation and drought relief for the Colorado River. But to me, the new smart way is we need to figure out how we're going to work together, find new tools and technologies, engage people, partner. And the biggest issue we heard today from Raftelis is the business model, how we pay for it. So I'm going and now working on a new business model for Metropolitan, because most of our money is from volumetric. But I'm asking people to conserve, and people who can afford to their own local water supply are off the system, but who's paying for it and the cost is going up is the people that can't afford to do it. So together we need to think about technology, think about collaboration, at the end of the day, think about how we're going to pay for it and to move us forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Adele. Travis, you're next.
Okay, we're on. Well, those are two difficult ones to follow. I'm going to take a slightly different perspective on the conversation. Just being from Suez. Suez is a global company. We provide water to 66 million people worldwide, 0 in North America at this point. But how we've done that in providing these services to water, wastewater customers, then you add on solid waste operations on top of that, is we have focused on tools and technologies, right? Because you can imagine that's thousands of water utilities, hundreds of thousands of miles of pipe, and tens of thousands of facilities. So how do we start tying those together? Because ultimately we're a for-profit organization, so we want to optimize the management of those facilities and that infrastructure. So what we've done over the years is put together, let's call it a portfolio of tools and technologies. Some we've developed, some are external, and looking for agnosticism and how you put these puzzle pieces together. And that's a very difficult challenge because each utility is a bit different. My job is to try to apply that methodology to North America and working with people in this room. And it's a very fun challenge, but in doing so, we have to be very open and very, use the word as agnostic a lot, to start breaking down. We've heard words like silos, operationalize, all these things we keep hearing more and more. We're never going to be able to help break down HR, human resource people silos, but it starts with data silos. So how do we actually take what you are already collecting, what you're already doing, how do you do that? Because you're collecting so much data already, so much data you don't need, so much you're not using. Do you still need to continue collecting it? How can you use it better, et cetera? So how do we start integrating and breaking down those silos so that people, besides your plant manager, can see what the effluent quality is, or what other elements, the energy usage in the plant is? How can that benefit other parts of the organization? How can we look at this from, I think we mentioned the full watershed approach. How does understanding what the upstream watershed water quality is, what the predicted precipitation and how that'll influence water quality, how does that start informing not only your water treatment plant, but also communicating with customers potentially on upcoming potential water quality, taste and odor issues? How does that influence the collection system, the wastewater treatment plant? Then downstream, let's not forget that we're not just communities in a single silo. Our discharge is somebody else's influent, right? In most cases. for utilities. So how do we start stitching all those together from a tools and technology perspective? That's what's really interesting to me, and how do we do that in an equitable way, you know, a safe, secure, data-centric way? That I think is what's very interesting to me. And when I think about step back and think about One Water, I'll go back to what Hardeep said this morning. I really liked the 60% of our bodies are water, 70% of the earth is water. Let's think about the medical world in our bodies. How many people here are wearing a smartwatch? Some sort of smartwatch? It's a third, right? Well, what is that actually doing? That's a flow meter, a pressure gauge, you know, a temperature gauge. It's a sensor. What is that actually telling us about our fitness, our health, etc.? What is your annual checkup going to the doctor telling you about that? How is that helping your health problems? Well, each one of those individual pieces of data, stepping on the scale in the morning, heart rate, etc., that's not going to tell you a whole lot about the systems approach of your entire body. But you start piecing those together and understanding what the trends are, what makes sense, what leads to what. You're going to start understanding a better systematic approach of how you feel, how you behave, your overall health. And our water and wastewater systems are very similar, right? We're deploying sensors, and if we only deploy those in a very myopic niche component, we're not going to be able to scale that to a far bigger usage and far bigger bit of information. So that wastewater flow meter or level sensor or pressure gauge on the water system, how valuable can that be from not only the operational side, but also your planning groups? They can correlate that to overflows or water main breaks, or on the plant side, we can look at, again, things like influent effluent water qualities. And you know, we had a particular partner we work with where two of their different groups were managing biosolids management. So one had the drying component, one had the incineration component. So what they actually found was when they compiled that data together, which they'd never done, they were able to see they could get to autogenous burn, which means they don't have to add any natural gas fuel. The dried biosolids just keeps a perpetual fueling source. Basically, it's they're not adding any more energy or cost to it. They never were actually able to come up with what that crossroads was until they started looking at the data combined. And it was a very small silo that was broken down there. So that's just one very simple example that saved, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year by just simply putting things on a graph. So I think, you know, me coming at this a bit more from a data perspective and a tools and technology perspective, which is, again, my background, I see One Water really being the stitching together of those components to help organizations as a whole improve and get better over time.
Thanks, Travis. David?
Yes, I'm the director of the USGS Caribbean Florida Water Science Center, and I think our Science Center really fits into the One Water paradigm because our business model is inclusionary and is a partnership with the localities. We have about 100 partners in our domain scattered across Florida and Puerto Rico, and only about 30% of our money actually comes from the USGS. So the rest is driven by partnerships that answer real-world problems on the landscape. So just a few words on my perspective on One Water, some words that might describe it. Holistic's been mentioned a lot. Sustainable, equitable, in other words, the winner doesn't take all. Resilient, in other words, effective even during extreme conditions of drought, and effective during long-term threats like sea level rise, climate change, population increases, landscape changes. Also acknowledge trade-offs between competing needs. Adaptive management, that's a term that's been used a lot here in the Everglades. It's the idea of you can have the best laid plans in terms of very high-level modeling, data, but as time goes on, those tend to diverge, the anticipated result versus what you really see on the ground. So adaptive management is this idea of always truing your predictions and projections with the data, and avoid silos and integrate holistically across disciplines. And then Pierre mentioned the idea that we can find a lot of failures in water management, and we're looking for successes. And emulating success is one way to achieve success. So here in Florida, we had the so-called Tampa water wars that some of you may have heard about back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And that was a case of every county and municipality for itself, essentially. It was a very us versus them approach. And everybody was in search of and prioritized getting the inexpensive groundwater. It didn't need as much treatment as surface water. And because of that, you had the urban areas that had the money, they would reach out and extract water from the rural areas, for instance, Pasco County. And so you'd have a transfer of water, and you had some negative impacts on that. You had dewatering of the landscape in the rural areas, such that lakes were drying up, wetlands were drying up, and there was an outcry, and there was a litigation. It was a big deal, very high profile. And here's a key component in the resolution of that war was the Florida legislature had to step in, and they mandated a regional water supply plan that became Tampa Bay Water, and sharing the cost of this new approach, environmentally safe, that was mandated. And there were some trade-offs, so there were some winners and losers in the short term, and there was a large investment of money. We're talking over $1 billion and counting. And the solution here was to add alternatives to the cheap groundwater that was available to lighten the load on the groundwater. So adding interconnections, so the entire multi-county system was interconnected, and you could move water from where it was to where it wasn't. Skimming surface water more during high flows, enhancement of surface water treatment, building of a huge reservoir. For those of you out west, you might scoff at the idea of Florida having a reservoir, but we do. We have a 1,100-acre reservoir in Hillsborough County that holds 15.5 billion gallons of water. So there's another resource that can be done, even in Florida, as flat as it is. Desalinization, 25 MGD desalinization plant, and as I think the gentleman from California mentioned, reuse is becoming more and more the plan for the future. And then continuing use of the groundwater system as well. And in conjunction with this is very high level modeling and data collection to keep tabs of the system and to make decisions at the level of even weekly. Even every Friday, Tampa Bay Water makes a decision about how the water will be withdrawn and where it will be sent. It's at that granular level. And then there are seasonal projections that might account for, okay, are we in El Nino or La Nina? And then there are long-term projections that account for demographic changes and climate change. So that's about all I have here.
Thanks, Dave.
Sure.
Vern?
We're good, okay. I appreciate the seat on the couch here today and the inclusion in the group. My name is Vern Steele, and I'm here representing the National Rural Water Association. But here I am growing up as a youth in rural Idaho, where water was an everyday part of my life, as it is with everybody as far as drinking and whatnot. But I would get up in the morning at 4 in the morning and go out and move the sprinkler pipe so the potatoes got their water. And then you had to do the one in the afternoon at 4 o'clock as well. So well experienced in the rural agricultural water aspect. Down the road, I actually went to college in accounting and quickly found a job with the Rural Water Association of Utah, kind of where I learned my passion for this industry of water, helping the water and wastewater systems in the state of Utah with whatever technical assistance and training that they might need. 25 years down the road, with this kind of experience under my belt, I took a job with the National Rural Water Association, headquarters located in Duncan, Oklahoma. A year ago, I moved kind of back to my roots, back to rural America. purchased a house, and just interestingly, a month ago, my wife called me while I was at work and said, "Hey, there's no water in the house." And what was that quote earlier someone put up? Benjamin Franklin said, "You figure out the value of water when your well quits working." Well, my well quit working. And, you know, I hear people talk all the time in the water industry. There should be a day without water in America so people can really understand the value of water. Well, I had a week without water, and I'm telling you, I don't want to do that again. I quickly started looking around to see if there was a rural water system that I could get on so that I wouldn't have to go through that again. And that's that's what we find in rural America. There are still a lot of people on private wells, private sources of water. Unfortunately, there are still folks who don't have running water easily accessible to them. That's part of this big picture, part of this one water issue. However, there are lots of rural water systems around the country that are providing water, and they've developed over the years. We started, my colleague Jennifer Palmiotto said in 1976 we first started providing training and technical assistance to water systems around the country, and have been effectively doing it ever since. And we've made a lot of progress, even though there's still a lot to go. You know, how many folks have been have been to a national park on vacation? We live in a country where we expect to be able to get in the car, hit the road, and take our vacation, or go visit family in middle America or wherever it might be, and expect to have a clean, safe drink of water, don't we? That doesn't just happen automatically. There are a lot of folks out there, I think someone called them the Jedi Masters earlier. They're not doctors, they're not lawyers, a lot of them might be engineers, they may not be engineers, but they're the water operators and the wastewater operators in the country. And they're the folks that do this kind of behind the scene, kind of the unsung heroes. And those are the folks that work for these water systems that I'm here representing. Some of the unique challenges, maybe not unique, but maybe on different scales, that these rural systems encounter. Geography is a big, easy one. We won't get into that. Political issues. It's my water. Don't want anyone telling me what to do with my water. Another big issue that I won't really get into, but some of the more, I've got to put my glasses on to read what I wrote here. The capacity issues are really what I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about. Education, technical knowledge is a big thing, especially in the rural. In rural America, you might have someone who decides they want to run for the town council. So they go through that process, they get the votes they need, all of a sudden they're on that council. They go to their first meeting, and the mayor says, "Congratulations, you're over the water system." And they already have a full-time job somewhere else, and they don't have any training or experience, but their job is to provide safe, clean water to that community. The financial costs. We talked quite a bit, in fact, about aging infrastructure at places. In rural America, that's no different. There's a lot of places where the infrastructure is pretty old, needs replaced. We talk a lot about water systems that never really had access to the funding to develop projects to make sure the water's safe. A lot of that's just financially based. If you have, 50 people live in a community in a $2 million project that they need, how's that going to happen? We're in a unique time right now where that money is available, and the administration has made it very clear that they think technical assistance to those type of communities is critical and necessary, and National Rural Water, along with a few other organizations like that, have been doing that thing for quite a few years. And now that that money is available, we're excited to help them get to the table to get their share of that. Another thing is the workforce. Aging infrastructure, aging workforce. In rural America, we're finding those folks that run the water systems are reaching that point in their life and they don't want to go out and turn valves and move water anymore. And there's not a lot of financial incentive for the younger workforce to take those jobs. So workforce is an important thing. One initiative that I think is part of this is educating the younger workforce in water, elevating the salaries and the skills so that that's something that people want to do. And then just kind of finish it off, my version of One Water really is, it's all of us. It includes the urban areas, it includes the largest water district in the country, it includes a 25-person group of homeowners that have their own water system that are so geographically removed that they don't really have a lot of help anywhere else. So I'd just like to make sure that rural water is at the table in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Vern. So Sunil, I know we're running it a bit late, and how much time do we have before we go to the next panel? Okay. All right. Also ask the audience, what did we miss? What have you not heard that you think is really important and should be brought? Don't speak all at once. Yes, Dave.
Of course, I put in the Who out, but I'll say it out loud.
Yep.
Today, the issue of private ownership of water really hasn't come up too much. One person mentioned it a little bit. How does private ownership of water, which is predominant in much of the West, provide challenges or opportunities for achieving One Water vision?
I think that's a great question, and it actually comes, this morning, I forget the name of the speaker, but talked about financial issues, and it's like, okay, who pays, right? This has come up on our panel also. Who pays, all right? And so you could say, well, okay, the federal government, pays for everything, some part, right? They pay for the people who can't afford, right? Or they pay for the next generation, right? The investments for the next generation. This gets to the question, like, there's a famous paper by Garrett Harding on the tragedy of the commons. How do we manage our commons, right? Water is a commons. And we're not always good at managing commons, but sometimes we can, right? And Eleanor Ostrom, Nobel Prize winner, right? Thought about this and found plenty of examples where communities self-organized to manage their local commons.
Yeah, but this isn't the commons, it's privately owned water.
Right. So, Garrett's solution was privatized. But that's not necessarily a solution, right? Because if the owner of a private well, I'm the owner of a private well, I haven't tested it yet. It's my backup well, right? Nobody's come after me, to actually provide a water quality report. But I know I need to, right? But I just haven't done it. There's plenty of people who are drinking water that has, for example, arsenic in their water, and they don't know about it, right? And so that is a good question, right?
Maybe Mr. Steele mentioned it.
Yeah, right.
Tersely.
It's a complicated issue. There are a lot of successful stories of, rural areas where it just wasn't working, and so a number of local communities got together, figured out a way to do more on a regional basis, create a water district that kind of has the capacity to, help the whole area at a reduced cost. There are examples where maybe that doesn't work so well. What we believe in is that the communities need to be involved. It should not be a top-down approach, forcing privatization, forcing regionalization. The community should have a voice in that. We strongly believe that.
And I think, and you also mentioned the importance of education, which is key.
I agree with that, yeah. And that, we talk about the 3 W's, water, wastewater, and the workforce for those, and that's what we strive to improve.
I mean, in Southern California, we have privately owned systems, right? And my whole thing is people are very proud of their systems. And many people try to bring them together by force, or by legislation, by action, and they always fail. And I think my approach is they're part of the community. And the biggest issue that they struggle with is they have a few numbers of connections, and they can't afford to hire a lot of people. So how can we as a big brother be good for everyone? And I'm offering this issue right now for a lot of folks is that I'm talking to our legislators about an idea where we have to be the technical backstop, the support, the operational stop, where if they lose an operator or they don't have one coming, we should be able to step in and help them. If they're struggling with water quality, I have the incentive and the need to ensure they get back on their system quickly because I can't import water, and if I import water to supply them, there'll be a rate shock for them. So there is a lot of that dialogue that could happen, but I completely are against us forcing them to come together. I think we can create an umbrella of support, regional umbrella of support, by not losing their identity, but providing that support and able to get the responses when it comes to applying for grants, get the technical analysis when they have an issue with water quality. And I want to be the backstop for them as a large agency. And it should be a responsibility across the board. So I think there is a change now in that relationship. And it takes us working together and create this collaborative regional. And I think when Sunil, you and I worked on the NIAC infrastructure report for water, one of the biggest things is collaboration, right? How we can have each other help each other on a regional level. And that's important, but we should not be forcing the issue to tell somebody, I need to put you part of this regional solution. It may happen organically, but let's start first providing support to make sure they're successful and able to deliver water, safe water for their system.
Thanks, Adele. Thanks, Dave. One more, yeah? One more suggestion? What did we miss? Edgar.
Well, it's not really a question, it's more like a statement, but I'm curious about your observation. So both the watershed has been acknowledged as a key driver in the One Water topic, as well as rethinking of business models. And as you mentioned in rural areas, you go on vacation and you expect there shall be water. In return, you own a large part of the watershed and you give it to the urban areas. So can you elaborate a bit on the perception, the value that rural areas bring to urban areas and how you can become part of that business? What kind of mechanisms do you foresee?
America was built on rural America. And I truly believe that that it shouldn't be left behind. I'm also a believer in technology. Unfortunately, I think in a lot of cases, the technology is not sufficiently utilized in those rural systems. That's an area where I feel like we could do a better job of educating those systems, those communities, those operators, of things that are available, things that could help them, things that they can learn from their urban brothers and sisters. We just don't want to leave it to be left behind because at the end of the day, we all want to go back and visit grandma on the farm.
Thank you. So, I thought that we would have a little bit of time to summarize, but I think maybe we can do that at the start of the breakout. Yeah, yeah. But I want to leave you with one thought, and maybe this is something that you can poll on also, right? So, if you remember that diagram that I had with all the bubbles, right? Right now, a lot of the decisions that we make are kind of driven by funding, so they're driven by the number of people in a given community, right? Or very rich people, right? The more people or the richer the people, that kind of drives the funding, that kind of drives what gets done, the priorities and so forth. What if we rearranged the system, right? And we thought about, instead of just giving, thinking about $1, one vote, right? What if we thought about, the different purposes of water, the different needs, right, for society, and thought about okay, we need to give an equal vote to that particular purpose. And this one, water for energy, water for drinking, water for food, water for this, water for that, right? Just as a thought experiment, what would that look like? Would that be good? Would that be bad? I look forward to your comments. Thank you.